Okay, so welcome to the first ever Black Sheep Podcast. Inaugural is the word we've decided.
Inaugural.
I don't know how much editing we're going to do on this thing. It's possible we're going to cut back and throw things back in. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll play the tone as we go. But glad you guys could tune in. My name is Nick. I am a... Hang on, probably...
I
am a lot of things right now. No,
he's amazing. That's what he is. He's amazing.
So my name is Nick. I'm the worship director as well as social media manager and more or less media director for Discovery Student Ministries.
He's so much more than that. And my name's Matt, and I'm the student ministry director. So I'm over middle school, high school. I'm over this guy and some other awesome people that I get the privilege of working with.
Yeah, and it's been a blast because it's
been a lot of fun.
We've worked together, so to speak, since 2014?
Yeah, 4 years. That's crazy.
Going on 5 too as we approach October of 2018.
That is insane. It really does not even seem possible.
Yeah, I mean...
You're getting old.
Dude, I'm turning 22 in a month.
I'm 27.
Yeah.
Forever.
Forever. That's awesome. So one of the main reasons we want to do this podcast is to share some insight between what it looks like for someone like me who's gone through that volunteer process and is still, to some degree, working through that and coming up with cool solutions for leaders to really own a ministry in some unique ways. And Matt has been someone who's very much empowered me to do that in ways that I didn't expect. So we kind of want to share that heart from my perspective of a leader who has done a lot of the different things you can possibly do in a student ministry, as well as your perspective of developing a young leader, such as a junior in high school probably, when I first started really serving here. Yeah,
and one of the things that we talk about and that I talk about with different student pastors that I'm in contact with is that we're better when we work together. Yeah. That when we talk to each other, when we talk through some of these things. And so that's another thing with this podcast that we're wanting to do is like, hey, listen, if you have some better ideas or you're like, man, I've done this and some of the things that we did was this, and this, and it made, it's just substantially better. Yeah. Drop that in the comments and stuff because it's so helpful. I truly believe that as we share, as we have open dialogue, that we become better. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and something that we want to do probably is open up an email link to hit us up so that you can potentially get your questions in this as we go on.
Yeah,
it should be fun.
Awesome.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. So this podcast would be 45 minutes of us rambling if we didn't have some kind of structure.
We need structure. If there's one thing that I know between you and me is that we have to have some structure. We will fill 45 minutes. Yeah, but it'll be nonsense.
Yeah, right. I have no concerns that we'll be able to talk for that long.
Yeah,
it'll just be what the subject matter lands on.
Whether it's helpful or just muttering.
Right, it'll be mixed in. Yeah. It'll be mixed in. But so what I've done is I've prepared a couple questions kind of in one similar theme for this week's podcast week, as if this is, I just slipped up. This is going to be weekly lately.
Weekly, you heard it here. You heard it here first.
But yeah, so I have some themes. Essentially this week specifically talking about my journey from being a kid in a student ministry that you were serving in before you were even the student pastor, being a student in that, to where I am now, where you've just kind of tailored and groomed me into this position of a lot of leadership opportunity. So the first thing that I had written down here, I just want to know what your first impressions of me were in middle school, like way back when.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And can I be honest?
Yeah.
Because can I be honest, world? You're a punk kid, right? Yeah. But I say that jokingly, but at the same time, truly, as this is my 15th year doing student ministry. Wow. And it's crazy just looking back and seeing students who really grow up, who rise to the occasion in a lot of different ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in ministry, but it's whatever they're doing, how they grow. And I think, man, when I met you and the Kenyans, I remember you guys were kind of like a crew, and
Brett in there and Corey,
Brett,
too.
Yeah, and definitely Corey. Some of those guys, I think it was man, here's some students who are passionate about their tribe and who are passionate, during that time about student ministry,
right.
and being involved and being plugged in and having a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something for me that I love to see is that kids that are engaged and having fun, it's like, man, what can I plug you into?
Yeah.
How can I get you more involved? Because I believe that owners are always going to be better than renters.
Okay,
you know, that idea,
yeah.
right? Of like, if you're renting a place, like, oh, the sink broke, I don't care. But if you own it,
right.
like, you're going to fix it.
Yeah, and that buy-in is huge, and then you want to go bigger and better every time.
That's right.
When it's your thing.
Yeah.
That's funny you call me Punk Kid. I'm going to put a photo up on the screen.
Yeah.
I think I have 1 or 2 photos of us back in middle school.
That's right.
Specifically one where I was wearing...
David Bowie?
It might have been Green Day.
Green Day.
It might have been a Green Day costume.
I surfed with him once.
That's a story for a different podcast.
Yeah, it was fun. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, really.
Shockingly.
Really?
Not shockingly. No, he was a really nice guy. He really was. Yeah.
I love like cover your bases in case he starts listening.
Right.
He tunes in.
If you're out there, you were really nice. Thanks. You're not watching.
No.
No one's watching.
If someone knows him, send him a link. We'll see if we can get to this part of the podcast. But, okay, so it's funny you call me Punk Kid and all that, because I totally remember that, because I was right in between that phase of shy, but also, like, ready to go when the situation arises. And I love that you bring up, like, the Kenyans and some of those guys, because, like, without them, I wouldn't have even been at this church. Without Brett specifically, a buddy of mine I still have, I don't know that I've even been in our student ministry at all, let alone where I am now with it. And it was just that buy-in originally of him like, dude, you gotta come here. You gotta be here. And I'm like, sure, sounds like fun. And then I met some of the leaders, like Nico and some of those guys. I went over to the house, played some video games. And next thing you knew, I was in the worship team back in end of middle school, early high school.
Yes.
That's funny. Now, I have to ask, I don't know that I made the strongest, like, dude, that's the guy. Like, I don't know if I would have ever made that impression, especially knowing me back then. I was pretty reserved of that trio, quadro type group. But
yeah, and I would definitely say, yeah, you didn't.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, with me personally, is very few people do. And what I've learned over time is a lot of times those that do don't last. Because there's those kids who come in, they're excited. They're, on fire. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like super 90s right there. You're on fire. There should be like a flaming person right here.
I'll put it in.
Yeah.
I'll put it in.
But, and they come in, they're excited, but a lot of times those people don't last. But what I've noticed is some of the kids that are maybe a little quieter, maybe interested, maybe questioning, that at the end of the day, here's the thing. Mm-hmm. Everyone needs time.
Yeah.
Because you got to spend time with someone to see like, hey, where are you? And give them opportunities and see if they arise to those opportunities or not.
And I love that because as I've been specifically working more and more with students, I found I'm not seeking out those crazy extroverted kids. I mean, those kids are awesome and they will, but like you said, they don't always last. Because especially with them when they have that fire, as he sits here on fire, this guy here, they want to go do the next thing. And if you can't constantly be fanning that flame, and it's a full-time investment in some of these kids, and it's obviously not to say that it's not worth it. I mean, it totally is.
Totally.
But the reality is, if they can't self-sustain that fire, they are going to go find that next thing.
And that's the key, right? That's the key is like, hey, can you sustain this?
Yeah.
Is this something that you're going to be, are you passionate about student ministry, or are you passionate about being the center of attention?
Right.
There's a big difference there.
Yeah.
Because, right, at the end of the day, like, this, and that's one of the things that we've talked about for a long time is student ministry, I never want it to be like me focused. Mm-hmm. I never want any ministry that I'm a part of or that I'm leading, because ultimately God is leading it, right? That I want God to be the source. I want God to be the key. I want God to be the one that people are looking at, and I'm just a facilitator. In fact, I'm finding more and more joy as I get above 27, being in the background more and more. It's like, how can I empower you? How can I empower some of our other awesome volunteers to really step up and own this?
Right, and it's like, that philosophy I think is what I've seen thrive in our ministry very recently, specifically too. Yeah. The more and more, both of us in ways have stepped into that kind of manager type role. Specifically for me and all the creative fields that I'm doing, the more I can have a certain kid just be like, all right, it's your project now, go. That if that project can get done and I'm not in it, one, over time it does get better.
That's right.
Because they've developed it into something that only they could have created, and who better to create content for our students than other students who know exactly. Like, that's the thing that I've struggled with at first was I liked designing things for me. I liked creating the worship setting for me because that's what I thought was good. Yeah. But the second I could change that perspective of like, I don't care if I like it. I don't care if I think the poster looks good. I mean, I'm not buying it. I'm not the one the one who's framing and putting it in my room. I mean, it would be cool if I did, but the students need to do that.
Yeah.
And good. It's just cool to talk through that idea of when specifically looking at kids who were more extroverted than me or more introverted than me. Ultimately, that never mattered. It was going to be how much they bought in to what we were doing, not to being the center of what you're like, you know.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a good, the point that you hit on is, like, I'm designing this for them, not for me. And I think in a lot of ways, like, I mean, you know, I say to you all the time, you know, you'll come to me and be like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, I think it's cool, like, what does that kid think about it? And I, you know, or even what do you think about it? Right. Because you're more in touch, ultimately, than I am. And I think, you know, that's part of the heart and passion, right? Is like, how can I ignite the faith? I keep saying ignite.
Yeah,
and flame.
It's a theme. That's the title of the podcast this week. Igniting.
Igniting faith and, yeah.
That's what it is, igniting faith and that's going to be the title right there.
Yeah. But I think, like, you know, how do we bring the next generation along? And, I mean, you know, one of our main things that we have here at DSM is you're not the future, you're the now.
Right.
How can I help you step up to the now?
Right.
And I know for you, you know, I'm sitting here, you know, taking on the student ministry, trying to put some stuff together. Early on, I'd volunteered for about a year and a half, I think, and love that. I mean, I had been a student pastor before at another church that we helped start a church in Oregon and came here and jumped in. But then all of a sudden I'm in charge of this ministry and I have no experience in graphics and all this stuff. And I see you and you're putting out this stuff on, you know, social media. It wasn't MySpace.
No, it was Instagram. It was early Instagram.
Yeah,
weirdly enough. Like, I mean, Instagram before our students had smartphones. Kind of thing. Like,
and I think for me it was like, man, here's this kid who is better at it than I'll ever be, right? And who likes doing it.
Yeah. How
can I get him plugged in? And so it's like, I mean, I remember one of our first conversations. It's like, hey, we're doing this thing. Make a flyer for it. And it was funny because, like, seeing how you've grown through the years, I remember how, like, it'd be interesting to get your, like, perspective on it. But at the time, I remember you're like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And it was like every tiny little step. Whereas now I'll be like, do it, you got it, and you bring me back this awesome product that's, you know, a billion times better than I could have done.
Right, and I love that idea of that perspective because for me, I totally would. And it was a season too. It wasn't just the first two graphics. Like, it got into the point where you had this sit-down conversation and be like, dude, you just got to do this. Because I would text you iterations of a graphic. It wasn't just like, hey, is this good? I'd be like, what is this? Okay, I'll fix it. What about now? Okay, what about now? And you're looking at a junior or senior making graphics on his phone. I mean, this is predating my experience in Photoshop. I wonder if I can pull up some of these old graphics. If not, you know, I can link them eventually.
Yeah, sure.
But it's fun to, like, look back at some of those because I look back at them like, those are terrible. And they really aren't. That's the thing. I mean, I have that lens of, like, I've always wanted to get better and better. So looking back, it's hard for me to be like, I did good then. But the reality is they weren't awful. They were totally usable graphics for what we were doing, especially. But when you first asked me to make a graphic, there was an Instagram graphic, there was a flyer, there was like a few different little things that you threw my way before I was even volunteering here. I was just a student, and I was scared. I just straight up, I'm like, first of all, if these are bad, he's not going to ask me to do it again. I don't know how to make things. I don't have really any frame of reference for what he wants or kind of vision that he's having. And at that time, I really didn't have a voice in design. I had a lot of inspiration, like most high schoolers do. You find something you like and you latch onto it and you recreate that person's style to a T. But then translating that to student ministry just didn't fly with anything that I was liking or in my skill range. There was so much cool design out there that I didn't know how to do, especially on a phone. So for me, I was sitting here freaking out because I'm thinking like, okay, if I get this kickball graphic wrong, I don't know that I'm making another graphic for this ministry.
He'll never talk to me ever again.
I'm like,
sure.
And I mean, that's the mindset you have in junior year of high school, which, if any students are listening to this podcast right now, don't worry about that. Because you won't get better. You will not get better if you don't just create it. And if you don't trust yourself, I work with a lot of students in graphic design and photography now. If you don't shoot and create every single day, you're falling behind.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're not going to hone your skills. You're not going to learn what works and what doesn't work if you don't make the mistake.
If you never try, you'll always fail.
Right. I mean, it's as simple as that, and truly. But you didn't let me fail. You always gave me something new to try. And that's when I want to ask about that transition from going from asking me to try and asking me to, oh no, dude, you got it, to when you thought it was time to kind of pass the buck into that realm of, all right, dude, you're going to make a camp graphic now. You're going to make this event bumper video. Yeah. And like, because part of it was volunteered on my side. Part of it, I'm like, hey, I think we can do this. Yeah. But the other part of it was like, hey, we have a guy who can be making some of this, but I want you to give a shot at this too. And I'm wondering what, like, were there things that you saw in my design, or was it more of like my, talking about this ignited fire? Like, was it more of my fire or my ability that kind of led to that conclusion of like, dude, you got this, go? Sure.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, we talk about this around this office a lot, is like those I see in you conversations. Yeah. And truly, like, one of the things I love, way back in the day, I remember reading something or hearing something from somebody that I was friends with, and they were talking about like Andy Stanley, and how Andy Stanley said, I want to put the best people in the room. I want to put the best people around me that make me look better. Right. And I don't want to be intimidated by that. I don't want to be, because sometimes, right, it's like, oh, you're incredible at this. I could feel like my position's in jeopardy. No, I don't believe that at all. I feel like I want to put you in the room, and some of the other incredible volunteers we have in the room. They're going to make our ministry better, because I can't do everything. Right. I can only do a few things really well. I need other people to be able to do other things really great. And so for me, I think like I saw in you that hunger. I saw in you were better than me, and whether you knew it or not, right? And I think for me, one of my passions is, and I've discovered this really honestly in the last like 3-4 years, is I love mentoring people. I love helping people grow. And I think for me, when I saw like that gift in you and some desire there, I was like, man, how can we grow this and let you just get better and better and better? And so for me, it was a really natural transition from creating some flyers and stuff like that to say, bro, like, you're killing it. Like, let's go for the next level. Let's go for the next thing. And honestly, like, one of the things that I stay away from is I want there to be a little bit of pressure. I want you to feel a little bit of that, because you're on the other side. You don't know that even if I thought it was horrible that I would guide you through that process, you feel this pressure of, I'm in high school and I better make this right. And some of that's good, right? Because you try extra hard. Right. In the same way as with me, with, my boss or somebody that, that I want to impress, like, I'm going to work extra hard. Well, that pushes me to to go that much further than I might otherwise go. Right. And it's weird because that pressure totally worked. I mean, it was exactly what I needed. Because I've never been one to have like that drill sergeant type love of like, dude, you gotta get this right. You gotta get this right. Like, that was never my like experience of leadership. I never thrived in that type of leadership. And I think you recognize that pretty quickly, that you're like, hey, I can't push him too hard, but I can give him things. And I appreciated that a ton, because I was hungry for that kind of thing. I did want to do something bigger. I've always had that kind of like, to a fault almost, where I'm like, I want to do the next thing before the first thing's even done. And for you to give me those kind of concrete, like, hey, dude, you're going to design this camp logo. I don't know how to do that. All right, well, here's another logo that we like. Try to make something similar to this. Like, you did guide me really well. But what I found moving after that, like pretty quickly after some of those first major logos I did, was that, okay, now it's my turn to start throwing my ideas into the pot, which was horrifying to me. I was so scared of that. I was so scared of like, well, if I start pitching ideas, one, am I overstepping what I should be doing as a volunteer? Am I overstepping what I want to be doing? Or am I going to pitch ideas that are bad? Is that going to hinder, like, and
I never thought any of this from you as a person. Like, I never thought you were this, like, all right, if you mess up once, you're done. But my mentality and, like, that internal pressure was, if I don't do well, even subconsciously, he's not going to want to use me. Not even from his own character, but just, like, if I'm bad, who would want to use me? But, like, you never thought that way. That was never your thought process with me. It's like, if this kid starts not doing well, I'm going to just drop him. Like, and I could feel that, which is what gave me that courage eventually to throw ideas into the pot. I'm like, whoa, what if we, for this event, what if we totally changed our entire branding? What if we went like this cool dark foresty foggy look as opposed to this, you know, bright colors? And like, and those decisions, if again, volunteers listening to this, like, make those calls, like, throw those in, especially if you're the person overseeing you is, you know, someone who is there for you. They're going to let you run and pull you back. I mean, that's a conversation you've had with me time and time again. I'd rather you go way too big and have me pull you back than, you know, me, like, kind of, like, tiptoeing along, like, kind of slowly walking towards something. Yeah. You would always rather me run than...
Yeah, and I think for me, like, one of the things that if you are a volunteer out there, if you're a volunteer, I mean, even if you're, like, you know, interning, part-time, whatever it might be, like, if you have a good leader, that leader is going to want to see you succeed.
Right.
And not because here's the thing, at the end of the day, we're all working for the same goal. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, insecure leaders, and listen, it's so easy to be insecure. I mean, you know, it's the, you know, younger, faster, better looking, all those kind of things, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're a leader, don't be an insecure leader. Mm-hmm. You have to be secure in who God has made you, and ultimately who God has not made you. And I think that's one of the things for me is I knew who God has not made me. And God didn't make me a graphic designer. I used to mess around with Photoshop, and I'd literally spend like 6 hours, and it was horrible, you know, and it became something where I was like, man, I need to trust somebody else with this. And for if you have that kind of leader, volunteer, or you know, intern or whatever you might be out there, don't not push the gas. You know, like, go for it, because if you're in my position so many times, like, you're hungry for people who are going to do that. It's like, because again, you're making the ministry better.
And that's something we talk about all the time. Like, as now I've stepped into that kind of more leader than designer role. Like, as I'm making, like, helping build up new ministries, that's all I'm looking for. I'm just looking for someone who I can be like, dude, just go it. Like, and I get it. It's so weird how quickly it went from, like, I don't know if you really want me to run or not, to, like, dude, I need to find some kids who will just run, who will just, like, put their foot to the gas and make things more than I ask. Like, I get it now. Like, and if so, that's like I can't stress enough, as that person who has very recently been from stressed about whether or not I'm going to be the right person or do the right things, to, like, craving someone to just own it, whether or not they totally flop or not. Like, if you are in that position where you have the opportunity to either create or to build or to grow a leader or become a better leader, just go. There's like, I mean, how much better of a ministry you will have so much sooner if you can just jump that shark, if you can just hit the ground running and don't hesitate. Like, stop second guessing yourself, which is something that you've really, really helped me grow in, is that second guessing yourself. Like, dude, if that looks good, do it. Like, I mean, I don't know how much you guys can see in these posters. We threw these together in half an hour.
I mean, and they're incredible. And I love them.
And it was that thing of, like, don't second guess yourself. Just put something on the page. Like, ultimately, the more you can create, more often than not, the better it'll be. Don't shell out and just do the first thing you can if it's a big project like an event or a summer camp. Spend the time you need to spend on that. But the small ones, just do it. Just, like, go and do it, and then move to the next thing, because then you have one under your belt. Your, weirdly enough, like, portfolio, your collection, your history gets bigger, and you have a product done.
You have a product done, and not only that, but here's what I think happens, and I think I saw this evolution with you, is you do one, okay, it feels good, right? I mean, and there's a certain degree to which it's good that it feels good. that you have something out there that, you know, we put on social media or we put on a flyer, and there's a certain amount of like, oh wow, I did that, and it's like, oh, that's cool. But here's why that's important. Why that's important is because the next time you're like, okay, I did it before, I know I can do it again, at least to that level.
Right.
But you want to go beyond that, and so it's just this. It's building a foundation, if you will, that allows you to become more and more confident. To where now, I mean, I barely reference you, or you barely reference me at all.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, go for this, do it, and then you bring it, and it's basically finalized.
Yeah. And I mean, there are some things at this point that you've relinquished the control to the point where you don't even see them till they're live. And that's like, even for me, like, I would struggle with that. Yeah. Like, as a leader, like that would take me a long time to get to that level. But I mean, how much less on your plate if you can trust me enough to throw a graphic on Instagram without showing you.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think that's one of the things for me is, you know, it's interesting that you said you're talking about time, because as I said at the beginning of this, I've been in ministry almost 15 years. And one of the things that I tell you, that I tell everybody that I, you know, I'm just blessed to be able to work with, is like, I want to take you further, faster. I want you to be better than me. Like, I want you to surpass me sooner, because I wish I would have heard some of this stuff when I was younger. I wish I had heard some of this stuff when I was your age. I'm thankful for my experiences, but I didn't have a leader when I was your age that was like, hey, take risks, take opportunity. It's one of the things I was going to comment on earlier, is like, I had that boss that was a drill sergeant, and it was do this, do that, and if it wasn't exactly like that person wanted, it was really negative. And I think for me, I learned that I didn't like that, and if I don't like that, then you're not going to like that. Right. And so how can I come alongside somebody, encourage them, help them grow, and not feel defeated? Because it's so easy. I mean, step outside of ministry for a second. It's so easy to feel defeated in this life. Yeah. Like, it's so easy. Yeah. And listen, we all want a place to belong. And I want to create a space where people can belong, where they can try stuff, where they can fail, and that we can say, listen, it's okay. Yeah. You didn't really fail. Right. You just learned how to take the next step. And man, that I think is what has been for me so encouraging and so inspiring, is seeing, you know, seeing Alicia, seeing, you know, Melissa and Kelly and some of these different people. Like, I could go on and on and on. Right. Tristan, and all the things that they've tried, and maybe, you know, they kind of stutter stepped, or maybe they fell, but they got back up and they kept going. And if we can have a culture that we do that together, man, that's powerful. Yeah. And I think we're seeing some of the fruit of that right now.
Absolutely. And like, I think that's what we should probably close on, is like, kind of like moving forward. And there's so much that we can address in further podcasts. One of the things, like, talking, like, moving forward with, like, kind of like your advice for other people in your position. And I can share a little bit of like my advice for people who are through the seasons that I've gone through in this like kind of window. Our ministry first, like what are some big things that we want to do moving forward to like empower some students, like as far as vision, like vision casting section of the podcast real quick. I mean, do you have anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of it's going to be going back over some of the things we've said already. But, you know, we talk about this at our church a lot. This is a place where you can belong before you believe. Even belonging in the creative space, if you will, before you believe that you can do it. Yeah. Not just belonging before you believe in God or Jesus or have said, hey, I want to follow Christ, but also having a place to belong, even if you don't believe you have anything to add, even if you don't believe you have anything that's going to be substantial, that you belong here, that you have a space here. And with that, the other also being true, that you can belong here even if you're not sure if you... One of the coolest things I think for me and for you that we've talked about some is we have some students here that are coming during the week, hanging out, and they have never stepped inside of a church until this, but they're taking pictures or being creative. They're doing all these awesome things for our ministry. They don't even go here.
Right, yeah. I mean, we literally have a student just recently, just like one of the coolest kids I've ever met, who took some photos of our new products that we just put out, some like our merch stuff, you know, like using their
product placement. It's like product placement.
Yeah, using their using their language of merch. They were coming in, taking some photos of it. 2 weeks ago, they'd never held a camera.
Yeah.
This girl has never been in church, really, since preschool, I think she had shared. And her post is on our Instagram page.
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, that's just so sick. I think that camera cut out.
Okay.
I think I just heard that one drop.
Yeah.
And so I'll adjust this camera, we'll do closing thoughts, and then we'll call it a podcast, I think.
Can I interject real fast?
Please.
I think one of the things, though, is, like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
How cool is that we are... Because, like, one of the things for me is I've always had friends who are artists and who have all these, like, incredible creative talents. If we can engage in culture and their creative abilities, and that's a part of them coming to know Christ, or coming to know that God is for them, that we just talked about, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Like, for me, I mean, that's awesome, because that's a dream of mine from when I started out in ministry. That's so cool. It's like, how can we love people where they are to where they're coming here?
Yeah.
And I mean, I just love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the only other thing that just right off the top of my head is, like, you know, a couple things is, one, don't be intimidated. Don't be threatened by people who are better than you. You need that. That's going to make your ministry better. Right. And give them a place to belong, even if they mess up. Because ultimately, if you see something in them, if I see in you a gift, even if sometimes I'm not sure if I see it in you, I'm going to speak it, because so many times people will live up to the words that you speak over their life, good or bad.
Right.
And how much do we need people in our life speaking the good versus the bad? I get enough of the bad. Yeah. I don't know about you.
Right, yeah. No, I know what you mean. I know how that can go.
Yeah.
And I guess from a volunteer who went from playing two-finger bar chords in the worship team back in middle school to overseeing a bunch of different creative ministries, as well as, like, all the other fun stuff that you've let me be able to put my hands on. My biggest piece of advice is just go. Like, I mean, it's so scary, but the risk versus reward, if you seriously sit down and look at it, it's not that, like, I mean, that the potential for, like, man, blowing it is never going to be bigger than, well, what if I went for it anyway?
Yeah.
What if, like, I mean, and you don't have to be a creative person to do this. You don't have to be an artist, video, graphic designer, photographer, any of that. Like, small group leaders, do the biggest thing you can as a small group leader. If you're a tech kid, come up with something bigger to do in the booth. Like, I mean, if you can get rid of that idea that something could go wrong and that could potentially stunt your growth, it won't.
And if you have a great leadership, because the truth is something will go wrong at some point.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
And I think that's, that is the next step, is, like, even if it's doing lights for the first time, doing, slides, whether you use ProPrez or another, program, like, just going for it, taking that first step. And because it's like we talked about, then you start building a foundation from which somebody can grow from.
Right.
And it's awesome to see, because, I mean, for me, I've told Nick, like, he's going to replace me. And whether he replaces me here or whether he goes on to start his own ministry or do something else, like, I love seeing the gifts that he's grown. And it's all because someone gave you a shot, and it's all because ultimately somebody gave me a shot on down the line to ultimately, Jesus juke moment, right? But, like, Jesus gave us all a shot.
Right.
By showing us grace. He ultimately is the one that we look at when we look at how we live our life. And, I mean, good grief. Like, the opportunities and the times I've fallen on my face, and yet he still gives me opportunities. Like, how can I not extend that to the people I get to do life with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should, like, close with this. Like, I love that we just preached on this recently of, like, you're looking at people like Peter, who went and preached. I mean, the second Jesus was like, all right, go and do this, they did it knowing full well they were going to get persecuted, knowing full well that they were going to get stopped by every religious leader on the planet trying to prevent them from doing it. But if they weren't bold, if they weren't ready to go, weren't ready to take that risk, we wouldn't be here. Plain and simple, we wouldn't have a church.
Yep.
It just wouldn't. And it's like that idea right there alone should be your motivation enough to take that next step. Like, look at who did it before you and look what it led to. You are part of that same exact story.
Yep. Yeah, and I think ultimately we know that we're better together.
Yep.
And that's one of, the other main things that we talk about around here is that we're better together. Go out there, create, do something, take a chance and watch what God does. Yeah. Because it's incredible to see what God's done in your life. It's incredible to see what God's going to do in your life and so many of the other people that we get to do life with. So, yeah, go out there. I love Peter. Peter's awesome.